The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. The judge, a stern man with a reputation for being unshakable, leaned back in his leather chair, his lips curling into a faint smirk. He had seen it all. Or so he thought. Before him stood a young black woman, her posture defiant, her eyes sharp. She was dressed simply, almost unassumingly, and the judge had already made up his mind about her. Another case, another defendant, another day. But this wasn't just another day. This wasn't just another case. And she wasn't just another defendant. The woman's name was Kendra, and she had been called to the stand for what seemed like a routine traffic violation. The judge had barely glanced at her file, dismissing it as trivial. He'd even chuckled under his breath when she stepped forward, as if her presence was somehow amusing. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably, sensing something the judge didn't. The prosecutor cleared his throat, ready to proceed. But Kendra didn't wait for permission to speak. Her voice cut through the room like a blade, calm but commanding. "Your Honor," she began, "I think you'll want to take this seriously." The judge raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. "Oh, I'll take it seriously," he replied, his tone dripping with condescension. "But let's not waste the court's time, shall we?" He gestured for her to continue, clearly expecting her to fumble through some excuse or plea. But Kendra didn't fumble. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out something small, something metallic. The room seemed to freeze as she held it up, the light catching the engraved letters. U.S. Secret Service. The judge's smirk vanished. His chair creaked as he sat up straight, his eyes narrowing as he leaned forward. The prosecutor's pen slipped from his hand, clattering onto the table. Even the bailiff, who had seen his fair share of surprises, took a step back. Kendra's badge gleamed in the fluorescent light, and for the first time in his career, the judge was at a loss for words. The tension in the room was palpable, a silent storm brewing as everyone waited for her next move. But Kendra didn't say a word. She just stood there, her gaze locked on the judge, her badge still raised. The silence stretched, each second feeling like an eternity. What was a routine traffic case had just turned into something far more complicated. Who was this woman? Why was a Secret Service agent standing in his courtroom? And what did this mean for the case? Or for him? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, as the judge struggled to regain his composure. But before he could speak, Kendra finally broke the silence. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady but laced with something unspoken. "There's more to this than you realize, and I suggest you listen carefully." The room held its breath again, the tension thickening. What came next would change everything. But for now, the story was just beginning. The judge's eyes flicked from the badge to Kendra's face, searching for some sign that this was a joke, a mistake, anything but what it appeared to be. But her expression was unreadable, a mask of calm determination. The courtroom, usually a place of order and procedure, felt like it was teetering on the edge of chaos. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a perpetual air of impatience, finally found his voice. "Your Honor," he stammered, I wasn't informed of any involvement from the Secret Service. This is highly irregular." Kendra didn't look at him. Her focus remained on the judge, who was now gripping the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. "Agent," he said, his voice strained, "perhaps you'd care to explain what exactly is going on here." It wasn't a question so much as a demand, but Kendra didn't flinch. She lowered her badge and slipped it back into her pocket, her movements deliberate, almost theatrical. "Your Honor," she began, "this isn't about a traffic violation. That was just the cover. I'm here because there's something much bigger at play, and it involves this courtroom." The judge's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being caught off guard, and he didn't like it. "Agent," he said, his tone sharper now, "if this is some kind of investigation, You're required to follow protocol. You can't just waltz in here and... Kendra cut him off, her voice firm but not raised. With all due respect, Your Honor, protocol went out the window the moment this case landed on your docket. I'm here because there's a threat. A serious one. And it's connected to someone in this room. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The prosecutor's face went pale, and the bailiff instinctively reached for his sidearm, though he stopped short of drawing it. The judge leaned back again, his mind racing. A threat? In his courtroom? It sounded impossible. But the look in Kendra's eyes told him she wasn't bluffing. What kind of threat? He asked, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. Kendra hesitated for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. I can't go into all the details here, she said, glancing around the room. But what I can tell you is that this isn't just about me or this case. It's about national security. And if we don't handle this carefully, people could get hurt. The judge's stomach churned. National security? In his small, unremarkable courtroom? It felt like the plot of a bad movie. But the gravity in Kendra's voice was undeniable. The prosecutor, still struggling to process what was happening, interjected again. Your Honor, this is highly unorthodox. If she's here on official business, there should be paperwork, notifications, something. We can't just... The judge held up a hand, silencing him. Enough, he said, his voice firm. He turned back to Kendra. Agent, if what you're saying is true, then we need to handle this discreetly. But I need more than vague warnings. I need facts. Kendra nodded, her expression softening just slightly. I understand, Your Honor, and I'll provide what I can. But first, I need your assurance that what I say here stays in this room. No leaks, no calls, no outside interference. Can I have your word on that? The judge hesitated. He wasn't used to being asked for his word, especially not in his own courtroom. But something about Kendra's demeanor, her calm authority, the weight of her words, made it impossible to refuse. You have my word, he said finally. But this had better be good. Kendra took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what came next. 3 days ago, she began, we intercepted a communication that mentioned this courtroom by name. It wasn't detailed, but it was enough to raise red flags. We traced it back to a known operative, someone with ties to a group that's been on our radar for years. They're planning something, and it's tied to a case you're presiding over. That's why I'm here, to find out what they're after and stop them before it's too late. The judge's mind raced. A known operative, a planned attack. It was almost too much to process. And you think this operative is here? In my courtroom? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kendra's gaze swept the room, lingering for a moment on the prosecutor, the bailiff, even the court reporter who had been quietly typing away. I don't know, she admitted. But I do know that they're watching. And if we make one wrong move, it could tip them off. The prosecutor, who had been silent for a moment, suddenly spoke up. This is insane, he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. You're saying there's some kind of spy or terrorist in this room? Right now? That's impossible. Kendra turned to him, her expression unreadable. I wish it were, she said. But the truth is, threats don't always look the way we expect them to. They can be anyone, anywhere. And right now, they're closer than you think. The room fell silent again, the weight of her words settling over everyone like a thick fog. The judge rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of it all. So, what do you suggest we do? He asked finally. Kendra's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. We proceed carefully, she said. But we also need to act fast. I need access to your case files, your records, anything that might give us a clue about what they're after. And I need your cooperation, Your Honor. Lives could depend on it. The judge nodded slowly, his mind still reeling. He had no idea what he was getting into, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just another day in court. This was something far bigger, far more dangerous. And as he looked around the room, at the faces of the people he thought he knew, he couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. But before he could respond, the door at the back of the courtroom creaked open. Everyone turned, their hearts pounding, as a figure stepped inside. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face obscured by the shadows. He didn't say a word, but his presence was enough to send a chill through the room. Kendra's hand twitched, as if reaching for something, but she stopped herself. The judge's breath caught in his throat. Who was this man? Was he friend or foe? And what did his arrival mean for the unfolding drama? The tension in the room was unbearable, a coiled spring ready to snap. Kendra's eyes narrowed as she studied the newcomer, her mind racing. The judge gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. The prosecutor looked like he was about to faint. And the man in the doorway, he just stood there, silent and still, as if waiting for the right moment to reveal his hand. The story was far from over, and the stakes had just gotten even higher.